Hello, welcome to Brass Tacks. I'm Zakir Jacob. India has read out the Riot Act to Canada by asking it to remove 41 of its diplomats in order to bring parity. Now, those diplomats left last week, but Canada insists that India violated the Vienna Convention, that India was being incredibly difficult. In response, Foreign Minister Jaishankar has said that the reason why these diplomats were sent back was because India had information of their interference in India's internal affairs. And some of this stuff, he said, will come out in the next few days. He also added that India is open to considering restoring visas for Canadians which had been halted in light of this controversy. But the Khalistani protests continue, including yesterday outside the Indian consulate in Vancouver. The question that is being asked is, why should India let Canada off the hook just yet?
The government of India decided to unilaterally revoke the diplomatic immunity of 40 Canadian diplomats in India. This is a violation of the Vienna Convention.
We invoked parity because we had concerns about continuous interference in our affairs by Canadian personnel.
All right, so you heard a moment ago from Jaishankar as to why India believes they have enough information about some of these diplomats who were asked to go and their interference in India's internal affairs. Now, top government sources are saying why these Canadian diplomats were asked to leave. Canadian diplomats, some of them, the 41 of them who have been asked to go back, allegedly misused their visa powers. Now, remember, almost half of them are consular staff. The other half are political staff, as they are known. Now, visas were allegedly approved for some people who wanted to go to Canada, Khalistani elements, soft separatists, despite fully knowing their antecedents. These same people then went to Canada and carried out criminal activities there in Canada, including being part of organized criminal and drug syndicates. Visas were allegedly given to those who were supporting the Khalistani cause, despite fully knowing by these political staff and by the consular staff, fully knowing their antecedents. Canada has not helped in extraditing certain criminals. There are 19 most wanted criminals, some of whom have letters rogatory pending against them, some of them who have extradition requests pending against them, and Canada has not acted on any of them. Canada was interfering in India's internal affairs. Canadian diplomats got involved during the farmers' protest as well. Now, this is the contention by top government sources, but here's the other thing. Now, India believes, and there is a line of thinking within a section of government, that given the atmosphere of permissiveness, as the foreign minister called it some weeks back, that there is a case, at least one that can be built, to take Canada to the FATF, the Financial Action Task Force. India is exploring these options right now on whether or not it can make a case against Canada for this atmosphere of permissiveness that's given to separatist Indian voices. Now, India may raise this inaction by Canada, particularly when it comes to terror funding that is happening inside Canada. India says it has credible and clinching evidence to back this claim. There is concern over funding and shielding of Khalistani separatists inside Canada. There is a nexus, Indian government sources believe, between a section of the Canadian population and the ISI, which is funding it, which is instigating a section of the diaspora. Funds to a particular family has multiplied 10 to 20 times in the last few years, is what we're given to understand. But while this may be a line of thinking in the government, if India needs to make a solid case at the Financial Action Task Force against Canada, it needs to have hard evidence of financial flows into terrorist organizations, into separatist organizations, which are being allowed on Canadian soil. But I want to first play out a series of reactions that we've been getting. Remember, this whole thing started with Justin Trudeau standing up in the Canadian Parliament a few weeks ago and saying that he believes that there are credible allegations of Indian involvement in the killing of Hardeep Singh Nijjar. India, of course, hit back, and ever since, there's been a downslide in relations.
Given the much higher diplomatic presence of Canadian diplomats or diplomatic presence here in Canada and their continuing interference in our internal affairs, we had and we have sought parity in our respective diplomatic presence. Discussions are ongoing. We would assume that there would be a reduction.
As of now, I can confirm that India has formally conveyed its plan to unilaterally remove diplomatic immunities for all but 21 Canadian diplomats and dependents in Delhi.
The Indian government is making it unbelievably difficult for life as usual to continue for millions of people in India and in Canada. And they're doing it by contravening a very basic principle of diplomacy.
In our case, we invoked parity because we had concerns about continuous interference in our affairs by Canadian personnel. We haven't made much of that public. My sense is over a period of time, more stuff will come out and people will understand why we had the kind of discomfort with many of them which we did.
You heard a moment ago about how this is a violation of the Vienna Convention, specifically Rule 11, Clause 1. Now, what does Rule 11, Clause 1 exactly say? Now, this is what it says. In the absence of specific agreement between two countries on the size of a mission, then the receiving state, in this case India, may require that the size of the mission be kept within limits considered by it, that is the receiving state, in this case India, considered by it as reasonable and normal, having regard to circumstances and conditions in the receiving state. So it is entirely up to the receiving state and, of course, the needs of that particular mission. So it is entirely up to the receiving state to decide what is a reasonable requirement of diplomats from the sending country and to insist that, okay, these are the number of diplomats required, therefore you can only host so many diplomats. So it's a bit counterintuitive and maybe even misrepresentation of facts for Justin Trudeau and the Canadian Foreign Minister to say, like they did on Friday and Saturday, that India was violating 11.1 of the Vienna Convention. In fact, there have been some sharp reactions that are continuing to come from the government and from the BJP. This one from Jaishankar Panda, the National Vice President of the BJP. It's part of our Motorola, India's best 5G smartphone brand's tweet of the day.
Hello, Moto.
So this is what Jai Panda has said in his tweet, that Canada says it's unreasonable for India to invoke Article 11.1 of the Vienna Convention to impose parity in the number of diplomats that each country has in the other. That exposes a colonial mindset of rules be damned, we should be allowed to do what we like. On the other hand, I wonder if Bharat should give them a dose of their own medicine. This is Jai Panda, who is, of course, a BJP member as well as a national vice president of the ruling party. Now, let's get to our big debate. Is Canada guilty of twisting and misrepresenting 11.1 of the Vienna Convention, which it cited when India had asked 41 of its diplomats to be taken back?
Hello, Moto.
All right, joining us now, Professor Brahmachalani, strategic affairs expert, Vivek Kaju, former secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs, Terry Miliuski is author of Blood for Blood, 50 Years of the Global Khalistan Project, and Francesca Marino is an investigative journalist joining us from Rome. Brahmachalani, let me start with you first. I just read out 11.1 of the Vienna Convention. Even if even if, what Justin Trudeau, Melanie Joly, what they've been saying, that India violated 11.1, and it's clear from whatever I read out from that clause that India is not in contravention of 11.1. The basic principle of diplomacy is parity, it's reciprocity, right? So if India has 20 diplomats in Canada, what is wrong with asking a similar number to stay here in India? That's all India has asked for. It's asked for parity. Is that in contravention of the Vienna Convention and in contravention of what is basic diplomatic principle?
The problem is this, Aka, that those that violate international law cite international law to continue with their very activities that are unlawful. Now you look at one aspect, terrorist financing. The Paris-based Financial Action Task Force mandates that every country choke off terrorist financing. If terrorist financing were to be choked off, Canada would no longer remain the international epicenter of the Khalistan movement. The fact is that Canada has done little to ensure that its territory is not used for terrorist financing. As a former foreign policy advisor to Trudeau recently wrote in Canadian newspaper The Globe, Trudeau did not want to lose the Sikh vote, therefore foreclosing concrete action against terrorist financing. Now, this is a clear violation of international rules. But Zaka, there is a larger issue here. History is repeating itself. In the early 1980s, Sikh terrorists based in Canada became a source of menace for India. The then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi asked Trudeau's father, the then Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau, to extradite Talvinder Parmar.
Yeah.
Parmar went on to become the mastermind of the Air India bombing of 1985. Today, we have a situation where Canada has become the global hub of Sikh militancy. The reason why history is repeating itself is because India let Canada off the hook in the 1980s. Despite the Air India bombing, the Air India bombing resulted in the killing of mostly Indian origin people.
Yeah.
For more than 2 decades, Canada did not institute a commission of inquiry. The commission of inquiry that was instituted presented its report 25 years after the bombing. In the meantime, Canada's sins of commission and omission were destroyed. All evidence was destroyed of Canada's culpability in honoring, in sheltering and shielding dreaded Sikh terrorists.
Okay.
So that's the reason why today we are faced with this situation. We let Canada off the hook, successive Indian governments. Now we are paying the price for our own failure to sustain pressure on Canada.
Let me ask Terry Miliuski this. There may be a case to be made out that the number of Canadian citizens who have familial connections here in India, the ones who want to come to India, their visas to be facilitated, there may be a case to be made that yes, also the number of Indians who want to go to Canada for work or study or whatever is a far higher number, therefore the higher diplomatic presence. But please tell me, Terry Miliuski, of the 41 who were asked to go and who left last week, I believe almost half of them are political staff, the remaining half are consular staff. And as you very well know, consular staff are the folks who deal with visas. The political staff are usually in a higher number in countries that are considered to be hostile, etc. Like India does not have that many political staff in Ottawa as the political staff that Canada has here in India. So please explain, what is the case for why such a large number of political staff were here? Consular, like I said, you can still make that case, but I don't understand why there should be political staff in as many numbers.
Well, there is, of course, a great deal more traffic from India to Canada than the reverse direction. That's the simple explanation for the large numbers. The second problem is that India, I think, has been taking a leaf out of Canada's book by playing games a little bit with the numbers. If you look at the registry in Ottawa of Indian diplomats, foreign service officers who are accredited to work in Canada, have diplomatic immunity in Canada if they were here, but they're not actually resident at the moment, you come to a number more like 60. In other words, that on paper, parity already exists. The other point to be made is that this all is interesting for international lawyers. Canada has no doubt similarly played some games, in my view, by claiming illegality on the part of India, that this is illegal. Kicking out diplomats is not illegal, and once you're kicked out, yeah, you lose diplomatic immunity. That's not illegal. So I think there's a certain amount of silliness on both sides, but the important point is that none of this has anything to do with the fundamental issues between the two countries, which have been rightly described. Canada's 40-year history of failing to stand up to threats of violence and actual violence by Khalistanis operating in Canada. It has been going on far too long. If this scramble and this dispute over diplomats is finally swept away, it may have achieved something if it has forced Canada to focus on what is it going to do exactly.
It clearly
about
hasn't,
legitimate Indian concerns.
even in what the foreign minister said yesterday, that we're open to looking at resuming consular services for Canadian citizens. That, of course, was paused after this crisis, went public and flared up in the manner in which it did. But even when he said that, look at what happened Sunday evening in Vancouver outside the consulate. So I'm coming back to that question, Terry Miliuski. Clearly, the Canadian government, for whatever reason, and we know what the reason is, it's domestic vote bank politics for the Trudeau government, is not wanting to rein in on these Khalistani elements. They were protesting Sunday evening outside the Indian consulate in Vancouver.
Not only that, but the signs that they've been producing, not just this week, but in recent months, have been threatening, deliberately threatening and painting targets on the backs of Indian diplomats. I mean, they have been carrying posters through Vancouver and Toronto, calling Indian diplomats killers and offering cash rewards, considerable cash rewards, $10,000 and the like, for the revelation of their home addresses, so that if anyone wants to go and take reprisals, to go get them, then they'll know where to go. This is outrageous, and Canada has let this go much too far to get to that point, but needs to do something about it, in my view.
But Vivek Kaju, this, and like I said, there is this thinking within a section of the government. I don't know whether it will come to fruition, but India is actively considering whether or not to take Canada to the FATF. As a former diplomat, what is the case that India needs to build to convince the FATF? Because my understanding is, in the history of the FATF, they've never placed a Western country under any kind of list, a grey list or a black list. That's my understanding. You can correct me if I'm wrong. But what's the case that India needs to build if it is convinced that there is this, as the foreign minister said, an atmosphere of permissiveness to these anti-India elements on Canadian soil?
Zaka, permit me, before I come to this issue, to clarify a few points regarding the Canadian allegations and made even at the level of Prime Minister Trudeau that India violated the Vienna Convention. First of all, it is entirely within the sovereign jurisdiction of India and the article of the convention, of the Vienna Convention that you read out, to decide on the number of diplomats that it will allow Canada to send to India. Similarly, Canada can place a restriction on the number of Indian diplomats it wants in Canada. So on that, I think there can be no doubt. The question was, what would be the modalities of asking them to leave? Now, here, let me clarify that normally, and let me mention to you that as secretary in the ministry, I oversaw protocol, the protocol division. So I have a certain awareness and a familiarity with the conventions and practices. Normally, a state does not wish to, which wishes that the other state or the sending state withdraws a number of its diplomats or withdraws a particular diplomat and doesn't want the shadow of that to fall on the relationship, does this discreetly, even perhaps publicly, and the other state withdraws them. However, the provision of the convention is that that a diplomat, a serving diplomat, especially a serving diplomat who has, and as we have said, that they have violated their basic responsibility, which is not to interfere in India's internal matters. If our assessment is that they are doing so and that is causing us discomfort, then the technical way of throwing them out is by declaring them as persona non grata.
Yeah.
Once that formality is done, then they automatically, you then give them a certain period, and if they stay on after that period, automatically their diplomatic privileges and immunities go. Now, here, we did not wish to invoke that. We did not wish to invoke that because that would have been an extreme step and we would have had to name Canadian diplomats. So we didn't want to go to this extent. Ironically, Canada and its friends, the United States and Britain, are using a liberal attitude on this, in a certain sense, our desire not to escalate matters by formally declaring people diplomats persona non grata, to say that we've been violating the convention.
Yeah.
My own assessment is, and let me add one sentence on this, had I been there, I would have had no reluctance in declaring the number I wanted the Canadian diplomats to leave, in declaring them persona non grata and throwing them out. Once I'd done that, no one could have accused me of violating the Vienna Convention. No one. Because that is the prescription of the convention.
Okay.
Now, that matter apart, now you've raised the issue of the FATF. In the FATF, as you have rightly observed in your opening comments, we will have to produce evidence of flows, financial flows, going to Khalistani elements, and those flows then being directly funneled to India for violent activities. We have declared certain people terrorists. We will have to show the FATF a link and the route by which these flows have gone. For that purpose, normally, you require a degree of cooperation. The Canadians, I'm sure, will not cooperate with this. But it is an open secret that Khalistanis raise funds locally in Canada. Those funds are used to foment and promote and instigate terrorist activities, separatist activities in India.
Okay.
But I'm not quite sure whether technically we are in a position, and this is a question which our security people and our financial experts will have to examine, whether we can fulfill the conditions prescribed by the FATF to name a country and then proceed with the process.
Let me go to Francesca, because she tracks Pakistan very closely, and particularly the actions that the FATF has taken against Pakistan. I'm just looking at the list of countries that have been placed by the FATF in its grey list at various points of time. Just a sampling of this list: Yemen, Iran, Syria, Turkey, Nigeria, Uganda, Senegal, Panama, Haiti. I do not see Francesca, a single Western country that has ever been placed on the FATF grey list. So if India has to make this case, as Ambassador Kajju said a moment ago, it has to be a watertight case. India does have, I believe, a list of 19 individuals against whom there are pending either extradition requests or letters rogatory on which Canada has refused to act so far. Would that be a starting point to build a case against Canada at the FATF?
It could be a starting point, but frankly, as you said, no Western country has ever been put on the grey list or leave alone the blacklist of FATF, and I don't think it will ever happen. At least given the state of facts, even Pakistan, for which there are much stronger cases, has been taken off after 2 years, less than 2 years. But the point, according to me, is not even this, is, Western countries and rule of law, something we pride in upholding, as Trudeau keeps saying here and there, upholding the rule of law. Now, in any Western court, you go in front of a judge with a case in which you are presenting only credible allegations of possible links without any proof, then tell me what the judge, good luck with the judge, because it's impossible. I mean, Trudeau is talking of breaching of Vienna Convention, breaching of the international law. They have been the first to breach it. First of all, expelling an Indian diplomat, which they say was the chief of local intelligence, Indian intelligence, naming him something which, frankly, is unheard of in diplomacy, and especially between friendly countries. The other thing was credible allegations. This basically means no proofs. And after a month, nobody has seen the proofs. I don't think even Trudeau has seen the proofs. The other thing is, yes, Khalistani movement financing, they are collecting funds, even in Italy, as somebody said before, with the help of ISI, and in Italy, with the help of Pakistani embassies, actually.
Okay.
And we have been having riots in 2 Italian cities last month because of Khalistanis. The hardcore wing of the Khalistani movement is taking control of the Gurudwaras. And in Novellara, we have the biggest Gurudwara of Europe. In Novellara, there's also a very big Pakistani community. Just somebody would remember, I wrote about it. There was a Pakistani girl killed by her parents in Novellara. So India, yes, the ground for facilitating financing of terrorism is there, but don't forget, Canada has been hosting for years Tamil Tigers who were collecting funds openly, and nothing happened. Canada is hosting ISI members, and so much that the man who's asking the rest of the world to respect the rule of law did not utter a word when Karima Baluch was killed in Canada. And those were not credible allegations of possible links. That was obvious. killed by ISI. He did not say anything. They covered it up.
So let me ask Brahmachalani, let me go across to that wall. So, you know, when Trudeau went public with those allegations, with that speech in Parliament where he said there are credible allegations of Indian involvement in Niger's killing, you would imagine it's been a month and a half since then, either privately or publicly, because he chose to go publicly, he decided to escalate, there would be some semblance of evidence being put out there, either in the public domain or shared in private with Indian officials, which we haven't seen so far, Brahmachalani, for the last month and a half. So either Trudeau completely miscalculated and jumped the gun, in which case the fault is entirely his, because this whole downslide in ties began from that point. I mean, the real sort of completely going off the park situation that we have now started from that point. And two, if indeed they have this evidence, I wouldn't for the life of me believe that they wouldn't have either put this in the public domain or shared this with Indian officials, neither of which they've done.
You're absolutely right. Had there been any semblance of evidence, the Trudeau government would have made it public, or at least shared it with the leader of the opposition in Canada, with the Premier of British Columbia, who have all complained that Trudeau has not shared any evidence with them. Normally, when foreign governments have accused another country of involvement in a killing, they have presented compelling forensic video or audio evidence. For example, the UAE, when it accused Mossad of murdering a Hamas commander in a Dubai hotel, presented compelling forensic and video evidence of the involvement of 11 Israeli agents. The fact is that Trudeau's own statement was full of caveats. He said, credible allegations, not credible evidence, credible allegations of the Indian government's potential link, not actual link, potential link in the killing of Niger. So from the word go, Trudeau was trying to qualify his allegation.
Yeah.
And he had no evidence to back his allegation. But I think there's a larger issue here. First, on the FATF. The FATF, like other international institutions, unfortunately, has experienced increasing politicization. One example was Russia's suspension from FATF. Then we have seen Pakistan being removed from the FATF grey list. But to conclude, let's not forget that even though, as Terry rightly points out, that Canada needs to start cleaning up its act, Canada and India are not adversaries but friends. We have to find ways to salvage the bilateral relationship. More bitterness and recrimination will only damage this relationship further.
Okay.
I think both sides must use quiet diplomacy to start addressing fundamental concerns that India has about Canada's role in harboring dangerous militants.
So let me give Terry Miliuski the final word. You know, there isn't an attempt to have those private conversations either. I believe there were media reports of the Canadian Foreign Minister asking for private talks. If you wanted private talks, why did the Prime Minister of Canada go public with these quote-unquote credible allegations? And secondly, there were also all of these reports doing the rounds, again, all through the media, all in the public domain, about how Canada wants to get an off-ramp. But my point is, if one side has chosen to press the nuclear button, then they surely should have war-gamed, you know, what if this goes wrong? What if the escalation goes wrong? What is the plan to climb off the escalation chain?
Well, exactly. I mean, I think it verges on political malpractice, doesn't it, for the Prime Minister of Canada to get up in the House of Commons and make these charges and then produce no evidence. It's inexplicable and it's unforgivable, really. I mean, why make the allegation at all if you're not prepared to back it up? However, there is another side to this story, of course, and that is that the Canadians say they did do, as you rightly recommend, a quiet diplomacy initial approach to the Indians, that they met at the official level for weeks, repeatedly, in which the Canadians didn't accuse India of having officially approved of some role in this murder, but rather that we let them know that we had evidence that somebody who had something to do with the Indian government had something to do with it. Somehow, can you help us by making him or her available, or suspects, whoever they might be, for an interview and so on? Can you help us in this investigation without making accusations? And then, upon finding that they didn't get any cooperation, the Canadian story is, and I'm speaking now of leaks, non-attributable leaks, the Canadian story is that we got no cooperation, so then we pressed the nuclear button, as you put it. Could I just also address, somebody said a moment ago that why wouldn't the Prime Minister at least have taken the leader of the opposition into his confidence? Yeah. Well, he offered, but the leader of the opposition turned down the opportunity to have a security clearance for reasons which don't concern us here, but he wasn't able to, of his own volition. It was his own choice not to get that briefing, although Jagmeet Singh, who, as you know, holds up the Trudeau government as the leader of the minority party, the NDP, he does have that security clearance, did get the briefing, and came out, and what a surprise, endorsed the Prime Minister's view that, yes, these are credible allegations. But they still give us no information. Okay. What is the evidence? Okay. Without that, we're going nowhere.
All right. I got to wrap up. I'm completely out of time. Thank you very much to all our guests. But like I said, this whole crisis began in early September when Trudeau went public with those allegations. The downslide really began from there. But now, let's see if there is a sliver of hope in what Jaishankar said yesterday, that we're willing to look at resuming visas for Canadians who want to travel to India. But we're going to take a quick break. Up next, another deep dive on the shifting geopolitics because of the Israel-Hamas war, the rising influence now of the bloc of countries, Russia, Iran and China. Some American politicians are calling this the new axis of evil. Are these three countries acting in concert? We already have a war going on in Ukraine, now a war in Gaza, and Russia, China and Iran seem to have their tentacles spread in all of those theaters. Now we could potentially have a third theater opening up in the South China Sea with a weekend incident involving the Philippines and Chinese patrolling vessels. Also, right after that, an exclusive ground report from Haryana of how a mountain of garbage has become a health scare for an entire village very close to the border with the national capital, very close to Gurugram. How in that village, every third household has a cancer patient because of this groundwater problem. That's right on the other side.
Hello, Moto.
Das ist diese Firma, die ist weltweit, das ist eine starke Firma.
Boston, you will see! Boston, you will see! Palestine will be free! Palestine will be free! We don't want no two states! We don't want no two states! We want 48! We want 48! In our thousands, in our millions! In our thousands, in our millions! We are all Palestinians! We are all Palestinians! In our thousands! oppose Israeli violence.
Self-determination and resist the Israeli brutal and prolonged occupation means supporting war crimes, and that this is somehow a justification and a false...
There are 30 North Carolina organizations that co-sponsor this rally, 30. Some of them national, some of them statewide. And they represent Christians, Muslims, Jews, they represent university groups, they represent unions, they represent the whole range. And I think that says a lot right there.
Then for 3, you hold for 4, and you take a deep breath out for 5. Breathing in. Thank you. I want to thank you all for being here.
Walk around this museum together, this beautiful children's garden together. Okay? I want to thank each and every one of you for coming. It means so much to all of us.
Israel n'aura pas d'écrit. Israel n'aura pas d'écrit.
That is anti-Semitic, and although the school board's approving the liberated ethnic I had the honor of attending.
Free Palestine! Palestine will be free! Palestine will be free!
In recent years, a shifting geopolitical landscape has seen China, Russia, and Iran align in ways that are concerning and even destabilizing to the international order. You can see this in the ongoing wars, both in Ukraine as well as in Gaza, with Tehran, Moscow, and Beijing often acting in concert. This alignment, or coming together of these three disparate but very influential countries, is being viewed by some as the emerging axis of evil. That phrase was famously used by former US President George W. Bush in the aftermath of 9/11 to refer to Iran, Iraq, and North Korea, albeit it had a different character, it had a different set of objectives. But now, Mitch McConnell, who's one of the most influential Republicans on the Hill, has called Iran, China, and Russia as the new axis of evil. So is there any credence to Senator McConnell's theory? That's what we will put to test. The latest chapter in this evolving alliance is being seen during the ongoing Israel-Hamas conflict. Iran has long been a supporter of Hamas, providing financial aid, weaponry, and training. Israel is convinced that Hamas could not have carried out the audacious attacks of October 7th without active support from Iran. Although neither Israel nor America have put out any proof yet of Iran's active role in the October 7th attacks. Now, this support has emboldened Hamas in its attacks on Israel, threatening regional stability. Iran has also played a crucial role in supporting Hezbollah, the Shia terrorist group in Lebanon. Iran provides Hezbollah with funding, weapons, and political backing. Now, this assistance has allowed Hezbollah to become a significant force in Lebanon and a persistent threat to Israel, particularly along its northern border. Now, this is evident even during the ongoing conflict, where deliberate and sustained rocket fire from Hezbollah along Israel's northern border has forced Israel to open a second front in this war. This is sure to divert resources and attention from Israel's planned ground offensive into Gaza. On another front, Russia's invasion of Ukraine back in February of 2022 had significantly destabilized geopolitics, particularly in Europe. It's the biggest war seen in continental Europe since the end of the Second World War. It has already claimed more than 9,000 Ukrainian lives, and by some unofficial estimates, more than 50,000 Russians have also died. The annexation of Crimea in 2014, then followed by the open invasion of the Donbass region in eastern Ukraine, which started in 2022 and continues to rage even now, more than a year and a half, that has strained international relations. It's also had a knock-on effect on both food and fuel prices, and most importantly, it was a violation of Ukraine's sovereignty, something that is mentioned explicitly even in the UN Charter. Now, this event marked a turning point in the post-Cold War international order. It raised concerns about Russian expansionism. China's stand on Russia's actions in Ukraine have also been the subject of scrutiny. China has refrained from condemning Russia's actions. It has not condemned Russia in any of the numerous UN resolutions, leading some to speculate about the limits of their no-limits partnership. This was the phrase used by Xi Jinping just before this war began. Notably, outside of some of the neighboring periphery countries, two of the only countries visited by Vladimir Putin after this conflict with Ukraine began were China and Iran. And that indicates a deepening of ties between Beijing, Moscow, and Tehran. There have been reports suggesting that both China and Iran are providing logistical support to Russia in this war, including the supply of drones. There are also allegations which raise concerns about the extent to which these countries are collaborating in destabilizing their respective regions and challenging the international rules-based order. And as if the ongoing two wars, one in Ukraine, the other in Gaza, were not bad enough for the world, there is now potentially a third theater that is getting added in the mix. China's assertive stance in the South China Sea has been a huge point of contention. In the latest incident, China has rammed into a Philippine Coast Guard vessel and a military supply boat, which was trying to access an island called the Second Thomas Shoal, where China has been trying to build a military outpost. China has also repeatedly increased pressure on Taiwan, which is a self-governing island which Beijing claims as its own. And the Philippines is a US treaty ally. Recent incidents like the ramming of the Philippine fishing vessel, which happened in August, and now the Philippine Coast Guard vessel, which was also rammed by a Chinese Coast Guard ship, these have heightened tensions in the region. Furthermore, China has not respected the 2016 United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS verdict, which ruled in favor of the Philippines in the territorial dispute over Scarborough Shoal. This is a tiny set of islands which are close to the Philippine Sea, which Philippines has always had sovereignty over, but over the last 10 years or so, since Xi Jinping came to power, China has been claiming Scarborough Shoal as its own. The United States, which is a military treaty ally of the Philippines in response to the latest incident, has warned China that its behavior in the South China Sea, particularly with the Philippines, is not acceptable. So these three countries, China, Russia, and Iran, are increasingly seen as a united front which is challenging the established rules-based order. This order, which was constructed at the end of the Second World War, has been championed by the United States. It has also been beneficial to its allies in Europe and in Asia. The alignment of these countries, Russia, China, Iran, represents a challenge to this existing global order. Each of these countries has a vested interest in destabilizing and potentially also diminishing the influence of the United States as the world's most powerful country. The emergence of this new axis of evil, as some people are calling it, is a complex and evolving development in global geopolitics. The combined efforts of China, Russia, and Iran pose one of the most significant challenges to the rules-based world order, and it could have far-reaching implications both for regional as well as global stability. The international community must closely monitor these developments and adapt to the changing landscape to ensure there is peace and security in what is becoming increasingly a fractured and uncertain world.
इससे काफ़ी नुकसान हो रहा है पूरे गांव का ही।
परिवार का क्या कहना है आपकी इस बीमारी के बाद पता चलने के बाद?
बस सब अपने दुखी है धीरे धीरे।
He is Satpal, a resident of Bandwari village, located not too far from the national capital. He was diagnosed with cancer and life took a turn he didn't expect. And he's not the only one. Many of his neighbors have met with a similar fate. Many of them have been diagnosed with cancer or other illnesses, all of which they attribute to a mountain of garbage that stands nearby and the leachate that flows from there towards their village.
तो आपको ये लगता है कि जो पानी, गंदा पानी ऊपर से नीचे आ रहा है और आके पानी में ग्राउंड वाटर में मिल रहा है, उसी वजह से बीमारियां फैल रही हैं?
हाँ, ये भी है उसका कारण।
इतनी बड़ी बीमारी लगना किसी को, और उसको जो आपको भी महसूस देता है कि उसका कारण कहीं ना कहीं वो कूड़े का पहाड़ है जिससे गंदगी, पानी, आबो हवा खराब हो रही है, वो है। क्या कहना चाहेंगे
इससे? मैं यही कहना चाहूँगा कि इसे थोड़ा जल्दी हटाया जाए और गांव में ये बीमारियां और ना फैले और लोगों को भी परेशानियां ना हो, क्योंकि जैसा हमने सहा है और कोई ना सह पाए।
Bandwari is a small village in Gurugram district. Apart from being situated at the foothills of Aravali Hills, it's also recognized from the mountain of dump that is visible from the Faridabad-Gurugram highway as well.
I wish I had some technology to make you feel, to make you smell what I'm smelling and feeling right now, standing at this very garbage mountain. This very mountain is near the Bandwari village, and just imagine your condition if 24/7 you have to smell this waste, you have to deal with this waste. Not only this, the leachate from this very garbage mountain is the main reason to worry. This black water you see on your screens is the most toxic form of water one can witness, and the more worrying thing is this water is mixing up with the groundwater of the nearby villages. See, we are still talking about villages and where people still uses hand pumps and wells to cater to their needs of water. And one very example and one very contrast I can show over here is that these trees which are near this very leachate, you can see this stream of water, these are all dried up. This is what this toxic water do. This takes out life from these plants. And in fact, if you see in the back, the trees are all flushy and green, but the plants which are near this very leachate water, these are all dead. Just imagine a human consuming this water or a concentrate of this water if it's mixed with the fresh water. And in fact, nature has a very less capacity to filter this water.
Once you enter the village, two things are evident. First, anger amongst the locals, and second, the fear of living in such conditions.
हम लोगों ने जब तिल तिल करके मरना है, हम लोग नरकी जीवन जी रहे हैं यहाँ पे, तिल तिल करके मरना है, तो इससे हम लोग एक सामूहिक मृत्यु की इच्छा की मांग करते हैं, हमें इस चीज़ की परमिशन दी जाए। कूड़ेदान जब से यहाँ पे पड़ा है, बिल्कुल नरकी जीवन जी रहे हैं, हम लोग 2 डिस्ट्रिक्ट का गंद झेल रहे हैं। कोर्ट का आदेश को कोई नहीं मानता, वहाँ पे कोई नियम पालन नहीं किए जा रहे, कोई स्प्रे नहीं किया जा रहा। जब तक सरपंची का टाइम होता था तो हमारे ये भाई सरपंच होते थे तो वो कराते रहते थे, स्प्रे कराना, मेडिकल सुविधा। आप देखोगे इतनी बुरी स्मेल आती है, बिल्कुल पानी जो बह के सारा बिल्कुल ऐसे, और उन्होंने जानबूझ के क्या काम किया, वो पानी को हमारे गांव के साइड छोड़ दिया ताकि गांव में बह के बिल्कुल आप जाकर देखोगे पानी भरा पड़ा है। उसके बाद में हम लोग कमिश्नर है, डीसी है, ये सबसे मिले हैं जितने इसके निगम के अधिकारी।
लगन जी, आपसे भी मैं जानना चाहूँगा, यहाँ पे बहुत से लोगों ने बात करी बीमारियों के बारे में, क्या क्या बीमारियाँ यहाँ के गांव के लोगों को हो रही है?
बीमारी तो काफ़ी हो रही है, पहले यहाँ बीमारी नहीं थी, अब मौत का आंकड़ा बढ़ रहा है। यहाँ बीमारी बहुत कम थी पहले, अब तो एवरेज बहुत आ रही है। किसी को क्या नाम है कैंसर हो गया, किसी को शुगर हो गया, बीपी की शिकायत नहीं। पहले यहाँ लोग बीमार ही बहुत कम पड़ते थे, शुद्ध खाना था। छोटे बच्चे भी बेकार हो रहे हैं, किसी को शुगर हो रहा, पीलिया हो रहा है, छोटा बच्चा पैदा होता ना बीमारी लेकर आता है।
Despite repeated assurances by municipal officials, nothing has changed. In fact, the situation has gone from bad to worse.
उनके लिए परेशानी है, उससे मुझे भी बड़ा खेद है और बहुत दुख है, क्योंकि अब हमारे सराउंडिंग, क्योंकि मैं 55 में रहता हूँ, कई दफ़े तो 55 सेक्टर्स तक भी जो चीज़ उनको प्रॉब्लम हो रही है वो मुझे भी हो रही है। क्योंकि पानी जैसे हम ग्राउंड वाटर को यूज़ कर रहे हैं, गाँव में तो बेसिकली ग्राउंड वाटर यूज़ हो रहा है, शहरों में तो बेसिकली कैनाल वाटर हो रहा है, लेकिन वो चीज़ें मुझे भी मालूम है। और मैं चाहूँगा कि अगर मैं दोबारा बनता हूँ तो इस समस्या को, ऐसा नहीं है कि समस्या को हमने ये, क्योंकि एक पूरे नॉट इंडिया की भी समस्या है, पूरे वर्ल्ड वाइड इसमें काम चल रहे हैं बड़ी तेज़ी से, लोग नई नई रिसर्च लेके आ रहे हैं। तो मैं चाहूँगा कि अगले आने वाले 1-2 सालों के अंदर अंदर इस प्रॉब्लम को पूरी तरीके से ख़त्म करने का हमारा प्रयास रहेगा और हो भी जाएगा।
Residents of this village say politicians have been largely absent when it comes to addressing this issue, but they are not alone in this fight. From the last 5 years, environmentalists are pushing to make a difference.
So the living conditions are unlivable for them. Like if you go to the village, the leachate is almost in their village. The village is about approximately 1 kilometer from the landfill, about 800 meters to a kilometer. If you speak to the villagers there, almost every third house has a cancer patient or has had a cancer patient or has faced a cancer death. So what is really needed and what we have been telling Nagar Nigam for so many years is that they need to do a survey. The first thing to to address the problem is do a survey and verify how many cancer patients are there or how many cancer deaths are happening.
One thing is clear, that the villagers' life is getting tough day by day. First, they have to suffer due to the garbage mountain, and second, the effects and aftermath of consuming the toxic substances. A report by Yash Goel with video journalist Rahul Malhotra for Specials Bureau for CNN News 18.
Presented by
Ik zal een samenleving met Israël nieuw. Zal zitten heel klaar. Maar stop die hykleri. Maar stop die hykleri. Maar stop die hykleri. Endnu højere. Hykleri. Maar stop die hykleri. Israel myrder børn i krig. Børn. Altså, sig mig, jeg håber, jeg kommer efter det. Der dør i krig. Israel myrder børn i krig. Free, free Palestine!
I don't know like other ways to voice out my opinion. I voice it out over the internet to my friends, to to my family communication. But here in Denmark, I thought being in a protest, it's the clearest way to say what we want and what we need.
Ja, allerbest! Free Palæstina! Jeg er i midten! Hvis jeg kan nå det, måske bagefter kan jeg opsummere hendes tale.
أما الشعب الفلسطيني على الفور أي أعمال يقوم بها الشعب الفلسطيني ضد العدو الهجيم الظالم. Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! وإحنا بنرفض كمان الازدواجية الدولية التي
Boston, you will see! Boston, you will see! Palestine will be free! Palestine will be free! We don't want no two states! We don't want no two states! We want 48! We want 48! In our thousands, in our millions! In our thousands, in our millions! We are all Palestinians! We are all Palestinians! In our thousands, in our millions! In our thousands, in our millions! We are all Palestinians! We are all Palestinians!
You are beloved family.
That's right! That's right!
What is happening in Palestine right now shows the true face of settler colonialism.
Hello, Namaskar. This is First Post and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. Week 3 of the war, it keeps getting worse. Israel has struck multiple targets in Gaza in what's being called the deadliest round of bombing so far. In all, more than 5,000 people have been killed in Gaza, more than 15,000 injured. Aid has started trickling through the Rafah border, but it's far from adequate. India too has sent 6 tons of aid to Palestinians. Israel's Western allies have asked it to adhere to international law and protect civilians. Meanwhile, China has deployed 6 warships in the region. We'll tell you what they're up to. And Al-Qaeda and ISIS have called on their supporters to attack Israelis and Americans everywhere. Like I said, it keeps getting worse whichever way you look at it. In Pakistan, Nawaz Sharif is back. We'll bring you the speeches, the drama and the latest developments. In the South China Sea, 2 ships have collided, one from China, the other from the Philippines. Needless to say, tensions are high. In India, 10 deaths in 24 hours due to heart attacks at Garba events. India's foreign minister has lashed out at Canada. And women in Iceland, including their Prime Minister, are striking work tomorrow. We'll tell you why. The headlines first. Sweden moves a step closer to joining NATO. The Turkish President, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, has submitted Stockholm's bid to the country's parliament. For 1 year, Ankara had blocked Sweden's move, citing security concerns. It withdrew its objections only in July.